I'm just thankful that I'm able to live in a place that I know that Crazy Horse walked. And these lands hold not only our ancestors' bones, but they also hold the spiritual essence of those who have lived here before. They continue on, that their presence continues on with us. The Lakota word for the Black Hills is, one of the words is Hesapa, Hesapa, Black Mountains. Hesapa is the center of the universe for the Lakota nation, for the Lakota people. It's the heart of all that is. The place where we live is a place that Crazy Horse understood, respected, and died for. We came from Mother Earth out of the Black Hills. And so when we go to Wind Cave, or we go to any cave in the Black Hills, we think of that emergence. We think of when our people once lived inside Mother Earth. And we think of the time when we emerged and we live now a different life on top of Mother Earth. We once were, now we're ikje with Joshua, common people, common women, men.
When I come to the Black Hills, like if I'm gone for a certain amount of time, and I come to the Black Hills for a gathering or for just for a drive or for a visit, and I hear a lot of my relatives say that as well. They feel when we come here to the Black Hills, it feels like we're home.
Bear Butte is one of our sacred prayer areas and mountains, and it's still a great, vision questing, humbleacious site.
Another place, Iakara, what some people know as Iakara. We would go there and get our sweat lodge rocks. So all of these places had a sacred and an important part in our migratory move around the Northern Plains.
Crazy Horse, also known as his horse is wild. Tasunke Witko was born in about 1840 in the area of the Black Hills and lived to 1877. Some of his major things that he's known for was the Fort Phil Kearny fight, in which Fetterman and his men were all wiped out, and several incidents along what was known as the Bozeman Trail, and of course the famous Battle of the Little Bighorn.
Tasunke Witko lived in a time, turbulent times and times of change. There are a number of different names that Lakota people can have, and sometimes they won't get their adult sacred name right away. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. In Tasunke Witko's instance, he did not get his adult sacred name right away. That was not given to him until later.
When he was a child, they called him Curly.
For his hair was curly, that was unusual. He had lighter skin, that was unusual.
In our language, we call him Jiji. Jiji means the light-haired one. And it's kind of like the sacred white buffalo among the Buffalo Nation. And Crazy Horse, was a mystical person since childhood.
Sometimes names are bestowed upon people because of the of the way that they conduct themselves, that observe their behavior, and so they'll give them a name because of their characteristics. Sometimes, as in Crazy Horse's situation, a name was passed down. That was his father's name.
There's a lot of people that want a photo of Crazy Horse, and I wouldn't go so far to say that there isn't one that exists, but there's none that I have seen that are proven. He's on record that he did not want his picture photographed. There are a number of pictures that surface, and we've researched all of those, and there's also a sketch that has recently been released of him by family. One of the photographs that's widely circulated, it's a nice dressed man, and he's posed in an elaborate studio, and he was never in an area like that. This has a tile floor and a elaborate studio backdrop, and other ones are just the photos were cropped or something like that. There's one that's that we call Stabber, that was taken by Alexander Gardner.
At the age of 14 years old, a boy became a man.
It is told by the relatives that when Crazy Horse Tasunke Witko did his vision quest, and he had his vision quest in various different locations. One of those places was Matopaha.
At that age in his life, he received this sacred vision, which was a time when he received the power of war. In our language, we call it Wotrawe, means war medicine. This medicine that he received came from the thunder being, the Wakia Oate.
Our people who have shared these stories about, have passed down, say that thunder and lightning guided his life.
And part of his medicine was the lightning design marks on his arms and legs and his upper torso. Hail symbols, paint that he wore. These are what he received in his vision. The thunder being itself would be his protector.
That is a very powerful kind of power to have. It's very, it can be destructive because thunder and lightning particularly can be destructive, cause fires, cause things to break. Thunder, the booming thunder, the voice of the Creator in thunder. So you have the responsibility then sometimes to be the voice of reason and the voice of loudness sometimes, so that the people will listen.
It created a mysticism about him. People were awed at his capability and his bravery and cunning in the time of battle, and his ability to overpower the enemy.
Relatives have told us that different people have said when they think about Crazy Horse, they think about him as having lived a life of being alone and lonely. He understood that he was different, and he felt that he sometimes separated himself from the people. He found that kind of guidance that he needed in his life by displacing himself and seeking out that from not from other people, but from places where he can get direct connection to the spirits and to the land. So maybe it was lonely, maybe it was wanting and needing to be alone.
Crazy Horse was a very humble person, and he was taught the ways of a warrior and to be humble by his mentor, Uncle High Backbone, who mirrored that same quality. And that's the way both of them were. They only wore one or two feathers. They never, had a headdress which would show all their accomplishments.
But his proven record was witnessed by many warriors and the people themselves. So he didn't have to speak of his deeds to brag about them. And that's how he rose to power as a warrior, war leader.
Crazy Horse would have lived by the values of respect, generosity, courage, fortitude, and wisdom. Those are the values that we as traditional Lakota people hold true today, and hopefully hold true to the memory of Tasunke Witko. Now, Crazy Horse was part of a warrior society in which only the bravest of the brave were a part of. He was a tokala, he was a kit fox.
Crazy Horse would be appointed a shirt wearer. Shirt wearers could be appointed from different societies for their outstanding accomplishments.
It's a war shirt, but it's a status shirt made out of leather, buckskin, and it's decorated, it's designed, its decoration on it is personalized to the person that is wearing it. And he would not back down from whatever needed to be done.
Some of the headmen came by and they would stop at each lodge in this circle. And the other three were all expected to be shirt wearers. And they stopped, and there was no surprise to the people, when they chose people like Sword and American Horse. But when they stopped at the lodge of Crazy Horse and Waglula, they were very surprised in a way, because he was actually from a family that wasn't like in a hereditary shirt wearer type family. And so, but they said when he was chosen, the cheering was like about 4 times louder.
We have a few instances in which Tasunke Witko spoke up against the selling of the Black Hills, against the kinds of intrusion by settlers, by people coming in.
Crazy Horse was in a grand council at Bear Butte. It was a very important council, and it was to bring the people together of the 7 council fires into unity to actually resist some of the encroachments that were taking place on their lands.
And his speech was to remind the people of the importance of our ways, our traditions, our culture, our language, and our sacred lands.
The Bozeman Trail was an area that was just north of Fort Laramie. It's on the east side of the Bighorns, all the way up there. And so by that time period of the 1860s, there was gold and silver discovered in Montana. And there was a push to protect some of the miners who were up in that area. And so these forts would eventually be established. There's just numerous episodes of warfare going on that aren't even recorded today, but almost every other day there was some kind of a battle going on between the Lakota, Cheyenne, and against the U.S. They had an officer there named William J. Fetterman, who was known as kind of brash and arrogant, and he disobeyed orders, and he was told not to leave the site of the fort, not to pursue the warriors over this Lodge Trail ridge to the north there. And he did so anyway, and Crazy Horse was acted as a decoy artist, and he would fall off his horse and act like he was wounded and running alongside his horse and leading them further and further and further until when they got over the hill, then they were overwhelmed by a large number of Lakota and Cheyenne. Due to all that pressure, and due especially to what happened to Fetterman when he lost 80 men on December 21st, 1866. Those forts would be closed, and the Lakota burned those to the ground. And at that time, they declared a victory over the U.S. The U.S. says it's no longer feasible to maintain them. They're gone. They're burned to the ground. Difficult to maintain.
At that time in history, the Lakota put up a great defense against all odds, to defend their land, territory, and sacred Black Hills. And it was in a time of desperation also. The buffalo herds dwindled down to almost nothing. The people were worried about their way of life, The buffalo was the way of life for the people.
This ultimatum, had been issued by the U.S. that if warriors didn't come in by January 31st, 1876, they would be declared hostile and thus at war with the U.S.
The entire Lakota Nation came together, along with the allied tribes, the Shahiala, Cheyenne, and a few Arapahoes. They amassed this great camp there, first on the Rosebud. They met Crook in battle there on June 17th, and they defeated him and drove him back a little over a week later on June 25th.
It was a Sunday at the Little Bighorn, and there was great, leisure in the camp, and nobody expected an attack. This was also a big religious gathering. This happened on the solstice. When Reno made his attack on the south, and Benteen was sent further to the south to look for the enemy, and Custer proceeded on up to where the area where he would perish with his men. They didn't realize any of that, and they didn't realize what a huge camp that was. Custer was racing in there. He was afraid they were going to escape, get away, and he wanted to catch him, and he caught him. And most of our accounts of the family, that Custer likely lost his life or was severely wounded very early in the fight down by that river. And then, then they say, well, why wasn't his body found down there? Why was it up on Last Stand Hill? Well, we feel they had taken their leader back up on the hill with them. You wouldn't leave your leader there as you make a retreat.
At that time, Crazy Horse was already a hero, and all the young warriors, looked towards him for direction, and they relied upon his strength as a fighting man. And he had center spotlight in that battle.
By all the accounts, even when all the soldiers were dead on Last Stand Hill, there's people like, the Hunk Papas and them. I mean, they all observed Crazy Horse and Hump and Crow King and Moving Robe Woman. They were all on that hill. They said these were the people who were there, and we recognized them as great leaders, and here they were on Last Stand Hill.
They wintered out that winter of 1876 along the Yellowstone River. We call it Hehakawakpa. And that's where Crazy Horse wintered out after the Little Bighorn battle. And along with him, he had over close to 3,000 followers. They had a difficult winter that year. There was no food. The conditions in his camp were almost starvation. They were hounded by the soldiers day and night from all directions. So they had to keep moving in freezing weather. In the spring of 1877, at one point, Crazy Horse looked upon his people, and the people were gaunt from hunger, starvation. And yet they hung on to him, and they followed him. So when he turned and looked at his people, he felt it in his heart, they say, and he felt for his people. And they said that he wanted his people to live and survive. The time for war was over. The buffalo were gone. That way of life was gone.
There were 5 major surrenders that took place in late April and May of 1877 in the Powder River country. Crazy Horse would be sent to Camp Robinson. Touch the Cloud would be sent to the neighboring Spotted Tail Agency about 50 miles east of there. Dull Knife would be placed in Oklahoma, and Hump would join General Miles as a scout, and the 5th person, Lame Deer, was killed. Tasunke, Witko, that was an intention to divide those 5 people.
Well, in the final days of Crazy Horse's life, there was a lot of tension that built up to what finally occurred the day he was killed. First, he wanted to make sure that his wife was taken care of. She was sick at the time with coughing sickness, so he took her to Spotted Tail Agency for her protection. And he could sense, the tension that was building around him between the agency chiefs and himself, and the officers and the soldiers that were guarding them. They went after him at Spotted Tail Agency, and they placed him under arrest and brought him back to Fort Robinson. And there at Fort Robinson, they misled him to believe that there was going to be a discussion about a reservation for his band and his followers up there on the Tongue River in Montana. And this is what he thought, that the government wanted to finally talk to him. But when he returned, he discovered that they were getting him ready to place him under arrest and to send him away. There was places like Florida, Fort Marion, different areas that they sent prisoners, especially those that were considered hostile. And he realized that this is what was in store for him. So when he saw the guardhouse, the bars and the chains, then that's when everything broke loose. He began to scuffle. He backed out of there, the guardhouse, and he brandished his knife to fight his way out. Even some of his comrades rushed up and tried to hold him back, And a soldier rushed up behind him with a bayonet and stabbed him in the back.
Bad Heart Bull, our historian, and the drawings of Bad Heart Bull and the stories of our people and family clearly convey that there was a soldier who did the stabbing part. But on the other hand, some groups, especially with the military and forts, they blame it on Little Big Man.
He came to a point where he made a decision that he was not going to back down from the notion that he would pass on to the spirit world if it meant that he protected our way of life.
One of his comrades stated, he said, he searched for death and now it's finally come. Heche tu elo, he said. Yeah, heche tu elo. So that's the way it has to be.
I don't think that he would have been able to live to be 80 and 90 years old. He died at a young age because he did what he was supposed to do in the time that he spent on Mother Earth.
He was able to create a passion within himself to protect and to ensure that the younger generation can still today understand our way of life as Lakota and Dakota people.
Towards morning, after he passed away, his stepmother rendered a song befitting a chief to honor him. The words in the song say, remember me when you see the Black Hills. Remember me, a defender of my people, a defender of this land. Never forget. And so said Crazy Horse. And he went on to the spirit world.
The specifics of how he passed on has no importance compared to the reason why he passed on.
Tasunke, Witko, hey, 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 na, ya, yellow, yeah, yeah.